My nephew smirked. Mom says nobody would even care if you just disappeared. No one defended me. I got up, packed my things, and left. The next morning, they discovered a box in the guest room. Inside was every account statement, every payment, every bill I'd ever covered. I, 42M, thought I knew where I stood in my family until that Sunday dinner destroyed every illusion I'd been carrying for years. My sister had invited me over like she did most weekends. Same routine. I'd bring groceries, cook dinner, help with dishes, listen to everyone's problems. I'd been doing this dance for 15 years, ever since our parents died and left me the house, the inheritance, and apparently the unofficial role of family ATM. The living room buzzed with its usual chaos when I arrived. My sister was sprawled on the couch scrolling through her phone, while her 3 kids, ages 14, 16, and 19, occupied every other surface. The oldest was home from college, burning through his tuition money I'd helped provide. The middle one was complaining about needing new football cleats. The youngest was demanding someone drive her to the mall. I set the grocery bags on the kitchen counter and started unpacking. $67 worth of food that would disappear by Tuesday. The pattern was so familiar I could perform it blindfolded: organic chicken breasts, fresh vegetables, the expensive pasta sauce my sister preferred, ice cream for the kids, wine for her. My brother-in-law emerged from his home office where he'd been hiding since I arrived. He nodded in my direction but didn't offer to help with the bags. Never did. He'd lost his job 8 months ago and hadn't seemed particularly motivated to find another one. Why would he when Uncle Mike was covering the mortgage payments? The cooking began like it always did. I moved around the familiar kitchen while everyone else remained planted in their spots. My sister occasionally called out suggestions about seasoning or timing, as if she were Gordon Ramsay supervising from her throne. The kids wandered through periodically, grabbing snacks and drinks without acknowledgement. Dinner conversation followed the established script. My sister updated me on her yoga classes and book club meetings. My brother-in-law discussed his golf game and mentioned a potential business opportunity that would definitely pan out this time. The kids talked about school, friends, and their various needs that required financial solutions. Nobody asked about my work. Nobody asked about my life. Nobody asked about the 70-hour weeks I'd been pulling to keep everyone afloat. The conversation flowed around me like I was furniture, useful when needed, invisible otherwise. Then my 19-year-old nephew started complaining about his dorm room. His roommate was messy, the dining hall food was terrible, and he really needed his own apartment off campus. The rent would only be $800 more per month than his current housing costs. I made a non-committal sound and continued eating. I'd already covered his tuition, books, and living expenses. I'd bought him a laptop, a mini fridge, and a car to get around campus. The kid had never held a job, never paid a bill, never experienced the weight of financial responsibility. He kept pushing, though, describing the perfect apartment he'd found and how much better his college experience would be with more space and privacy. His mother nodded along supportively, adding that college was supposed to be the best years of his life, and he deserved to enjoy them properly. I finally looked up from my plate and suggested he might consider getting a part-time job to help with expenses. The room went quiet for exactly 3 seconds before my nephew's expression shifted into something ugly. He leaned back in his chair with a smirk that made my stomach clench. Then he delivered the words that changed everything between us forever. My nephew told me his mom had said nobody would even care if I just disappeared. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. Said his mother had mentioned it just the other day when they were discussing family dynamics. The words hit like a physical blow. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to contradict him, to defend me, to show some basic human decency. My sister kept eating, not even glancing up from her plate. My brother-in-law studied his wine glass like it contained the secrets of the universe. The other 2 kids continued scrolling through their phones. The silence stretched and filled with meaning. Nobody was surprised by the comment. Nobody was offended. Nobody thought it crossed any lines worth defending. I set down my fork and really looked at these people I'd been supporting for over a decade. My sister, who called me when her car needed repairs, when the kids needed school supplies, when the mortgage payment came due. My brother-in-law, who'd borrowed money for his failed business ventures and never mentioned repayment. The kids who treated me like a walking credit card with legs. In that moment, 15 years of willful blindness fell away. I saw the truth I'd been refusing to acknowledge. I wasn't family to them. I was a resource, a convenient solution to their financial problems, someone who existed to make their lives easier and more comfortable. I stood up from the table without saying anything. My sister finally looked up, asking where I was going with mild irritation, like I was disrupting her schedule. I told her I was leaving and headed toward the guest room where I'd been staying more frequently to help with household repairs and kid transportation. My belongings filled 2 suitcases quickly. Clothes, toiletries, the few personal items I'd accumulated in their space. Nobody followed me upstairs. Nobody asked what was wrong. Nobody seemed particularly concerned that their primary source of financial support was packing to leave. As I closed the suitcases, I made a decision that had been building for years without my conscious awareness. I pulled out my laptop and spent the next hour printing documents. Every bank statement, every payment confirmation, every receipt, every financial record from the past 15 years. The stack of papers grew thick as I printed. Mortgage payments, $87,000 over 5 years. Car repairs and replacements, $22,000. Kids' expenses including school supplies, clothes, sports equipment, and activities, $31,000. Groceries and household expenses, roughly $18,000. Emergency expenses like medical bills, home repairs, and unexpected costs, $15,000. College tuition and expenses for my nephew, $43,000 and counting. Money lent to my brother-in-law for various business ventures, $26,000, none repaid. Vacation expenses when I'd paid for family trips, $14,000. The total amount exceeded $250,000. $250,000 I'd given freely, thinking I was helping family who loved and appreciated me. I organized everything chronologically and placed it all in a box I found in their closet. On top, I wrote a simple note explaining that these were copies of every financial contribution I'd made to their household since our parents died. I mentioned that I thought they might want to review the documents to understand exactly what my disappearance would mean for their financial situation. Then I carried my suitcases to my car and drove away. No dramatic goodbyes, no heated arguments, no explanations beyond what the box would provide. I simply removed myself from their lives like they'd apparently been hoping I would. Update 1. I spent that first night in a hotel across town, sleeping better than I had in months. My phone stayed silent. No concerned calls, no text messages asking where I was, nothing. Their lack of immediate concern confirmed everything I'd realized at dinner. Monday morning brought a different story. My phone started ringing at 7 a.m. My sister's voice was panic-stricken when I finally answered. She wanted to know what I meant by the box, why I'd left those papers, when I was coming back to discuss things like adults. I asked her what specifically she wanted to discuss. She stammered about how families sometimes say things they don't mean, how her son was just being a teenager, how I was overreacting to a harmless comment. I reminded her that nobody had defended me. Nobody had told her son his comment was inappropriate. Nobody had even looked uncomfortable when he announced that his mother wished I would disappear. The silence had been as loud as his words. She tried a different approach, talking about how much they all loved me and valued my presence in their lives. I asked her to be specific about what they valued. The ensuing pause told me everything I needed to know. Then she shifted to practical concerns. The mortgage payment was due in 2 weeks. Her son needed money for textbooks. The car was making that noise again and probably needed expensive repairs. These weren't framed as requests for help, but as problems I was expected to solve. I told her I wouldn't be solving those problems anymore. She could figure out her own financial situation going forward. Her son could get a job like millions of other college students. Her husband could start contributing to the household instead of playing golf 3 times a week. The conversation devolved quickly after that. She accused me of abandoning the family, of being petty and vindictive, of punishing everyone for one thoughtless comment. She said I was breaking our parents' hearts, even though they'd been dead for 15 years. I ended the call and blocked her number. Update 2. The blocked number didn't stop the communication attempts. My brother-in-law started calling from his phone, then the kids began reaching out through social media and email. Each contact followed the same pattern: initial anger, followed by guilt-tripping, ending with desperate pleas about their financial situation. My 19-year-old nephew sent a particularly illuminating message. He apologized for his comment, but explained that he'd just been frustrated about his housing situation and hadn't meant anything serious. He said his mom had been stressed about money lately and sometimes said things she didn't mean. He needed me to understand that everyone was counting on my continued support. The apology felt hollow because it focused entirely on managing the consequences of his words rather than acknowledging the hurt they'd caused. He wasn't sorry for revealing his family's true feelings about me. He was sorry those feelings had been exposed at the wrong moment. I didn't respond to any of the messages. 3 weeks passed before I heard from extended family members. Apparently, my sister had been reaching out to cousins and aunts, explaining her version of events. According to her narrative, I'd abandoned the family over a minor disagreement and was refusing to help with basic necessities out of spite. One cousin called to lecture me about family loyalty and Christian forgiveness. An aunt sent a lengthy email about how our parents would have wanted us to stick together through difficult times. Everyone seemed convinced that I was the problem, the unreasonable one who'd walked away from family obligations over hurt feelings. None of them had ever contributed to my sister's household expenses. None of them had been asked to cover mortgage payments or college tuition. None of them understood the financial burden I'd been carrying or the emotional toll of being valued only as a source of money. I realized that my sister had been presenting a carefully crafted version of our family dynamic to everyone else. In her story, I was the successful brother who helped out occasionally, not the financial lifeline keeping their entire lifestyle afloat. She'd never admitted to anyone how completely dependent they'd become on my support. Update 3. 2 months after I left, my sister's financial reality began manifesting in concrete ways. She'd been forced to put the house on the market after missing 2 mortgage payments. My brother-in-law had finally gotten a job, part-time retail work that barely covered their grocery bills. My nephew had withdrawn from his expensive college and enrolled in community college while working at a restaurant. The family that had once seemed so comfortable and stable was crumbling without the foundation I provided. Their lifestyle had been built entirely on my income, and removing that support had revealed how precarious their actual situation was. My sister made one final attempt to reconcile, showing up at my new apartment unannounced. She looked exhausted and defeated in a way I'd never seen before. She wanted to apologize properly and discuss how we could rebuild our relationship. I let her in because she was still my sister, despite everything. She sat on my couch and cried while explaining how difficult the past few months had been. She admitted that they'd taken my support for granted and hadn't fully appreciated how much I'd been doing for them. Then she asked what it would take for me to consider helping them again. Not as much as before, just enough to keep them from losing the house. Maybe I could co-sign a loan or help with the mortgage until her husband's business ideas started generating income. I asked her directly whether she actually missed my presence in their lives or just my financial contributions. She insisted it was both, but couldn't articulate what she missed about me as a person. She couldn't recall recent conversations we'd had about my work, my interests, or my life outside of their problems. When I pressed her about her son's comment, about wishing I would disappear, she minimized it again. Teenagers say stupid things when they're frustrated. Families sometimes express feelings poorly. I was making too big a deal out of a momentary lapse in judgment. I told her that the comment itself wasn't the problem. The problem was the silence that followed it. The problem was that nobody in her family thought my feelings were worth defending. The problem was that they'd all heard those words and felt nothing, no outrage, no embarrassment, no desire to contradict them. She left without getting the financial assistance she'd come seeking. I haven't heard from any of them since. My life has improved dramatically in their absence. I've been able to save money for the first time in years. I've started traveling, pursuing hobbies I'd abandoned, and building relationships with people who value me as a complete person rather than a financial resource. Sometimes I wonder if I overreacted to one hurtful comment from a thoughtless teenager. Then I remember the silence that followed those words and know I made the right choice. That silence told me everything I needed to know about my place in their lives. I discovered that disappearing from their world didn't hurt me at all. In fact, it freed me to find people who would actually care if I disappeared. People who see me as more than a walking wallet with convenient family connections. The box of financial records I left behind wasn't meant as punishment. It was meant as education. I wanted them to understand exactly what they'd been taking for granted and what my absence would cost them. Based on the frantic phone calls and desperate messages that followed, The lesson was received clearly. I don't regret leaving. I regret staying as long as I did.